Hello, good evening. Happy Mommy Mondays. If you are listening to this, you are in for a treat. We are absolutely excited and overwhelmed by the many responses that we've had on this topic today. We're going to be talking about anxiety, being anxious, especially for my mamas out there that felt anxious. If you tuned in a couple weeks ago, we talked about depression. And so, just like depression, anxiety is a huge buzzword that you hear around. So, someone that has dealt with mental illness as a mental health professional, we really want to hone in on what it really is, what it's not, so we can address it properly within ourselves and in our children. So, as always, if you are coming back to Mommy Mondays, we want to hear from you. So, chime in the comments, tell us where you're from, if you can hear us okay, and also put any questions you have. We have a phenomenal woman, a phenomenal counselor who is here to answer our questions. So, if you have any, chime it in. I will be reading comments throughout. And if you are new to Mommy Mondays, welcome. We are so happy for you to join us on this side of Facebook, where we have honest, open, transparent conversations about motherhood, about our children, things that matter to us. All right. So I'm going to give it a few minutes for everyone to chime in, and then we're going to dive right in. Let's see here. Go. Guys, I'm so happy I can spit. If I could tell you like how long today's conversation has been on my mind, it will blow you away because um, I know we're doing a lot in the mental health space as far as dealing with awareness and bringing understanding. But it's amazing how much misinformation is out there. And so, as always, I want to bring you the professionals. I want to bring you people that deal with it day in and day out. So that way, we're not learning things and having to relearn things. But then also that we can really be empowered because something like anxiety, something like mental illness in general, can kind of make us feel negative. It can make us feel low about ourselves. But I think the more that we have accurate information, the more powerful we can be, and not just addressing it, but also in how we see ourselves. So, without further ado, today's guest is someone that is becoming so near and dear to my heart. She's a sweetheart. I pray that you guys, when you see her, when you hear her voice, that you feel that just calmness that she brings to everyone around her, um, and just makes you feel like you could be free to talk. And so I pray that that's how you guys feel as well. And I'm sure you'll enjoy everything she has to share. So without further ado, let's go. I introduce to you Miss Rose. Ah, I'm practicing now. I got a blank. Oh, Katerina. No.
How about if I help you with this one? It's Catriana. You almost had it right.
I felt it in my being, but I was like, I don't trust it.
Oh, maybe we should talk about that too.
Oh no, now I got a counseling session. I love it. So before we even get started, can you tell the people who you are?
Okay, so shall we start forward or backward, do you think? Like we can start with who I am today, or we can start for how I got to this point. Which would you prefer?
Oh my, that's good. Um, both in whatever order. Because I think they're both important because I think sometimes when we talk about counselors, sometimes it feels like we're far removed and we forget that they're human beings. So,
Oh, that helps. All right, so a little bit of background. I have 11 children. Um, yes, I really do. 6 boys, Yeah, 6 boys, 5 girls. Gosh, I had to think about that for a minute. So I am all too human, guys. And I've had my own struggles off and on with anxiety at times too, because it's hard. This life is really hard for us sometimes. So
Yeah.
the one thing I want to encourage you today is that even if you have suffered with anxiety or fear or worry, whatever term you prefer to use for this, you can overcome it. You can learn better ways to handle it, because even your good counselors have dealt with it at some point in time in life. They just don't always tell you these things, right? Because they want to be the helper, they want to be the professional. So they don't want you to turn around and worry about them, because it's our job to worry about you. Okay.
That's a good point. Yes.
I try and make counseling human, right? And that's one of the things that I think I bring to the table as a military and family life counselor, and why I really do well in this role, because I want my clients to feel heard. I want them to feel like they can come and talk to me about anything,
Yeah.
right? And if they don't know who I am, then they don't feel like they can trust me. And if I don't have that trust, then I can't do my job adequately anyway. So I'm like, let me see what I can share with you to make me human, so that they feel really confident, like, oh, wow, I think I could trust this person with all of the things that I'm really struggling with right now.
That is so true. Now I understand why I give you all the business. Like I just be like, "Blah."
Well, thank you. I appreciate all the business, actually.
Oh my goodness. We have Mama Annette on, Jessie, she's on. They all say hello, 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 ladies. God bless you. Please put any comments, questions you have throughout today's conversation. If we have to do a part two, we will gladly do a part two. But we're going to just dive in head first with something like anxiety. And I want to ask you, Rose, what is anxiety?
So, actually, that question always stumps me, to be honest, Kia, because everybody thinks it's either an emotional thing, and us Christians want to say it's a spiritual thing. But then if you talk to other people in the healthcare profession, they want to make it a cognitive thinking thing. Some people want to make it an illness thing. And so I find myself always disliking that question, because I want to normalize it. I want to turn around and say, guess what? Anxiety really is fear and worry, right? That becomes overwhelming. And sometimes it becomes overwhelming because we just don't have the tools, right?
Well, we're
So,
done. There you go. Because what you said is so profound, and I think that's why it gets that negative feel when you talk about anxiety, or even when you feel yourself anxious, you feel yourself kind of, oh, I'm about to spiral out. But when you just say, look, it's fear and worry, we deal with that in all aspects of our life. I just need tools to navigate it. I love that.
well, if we had to bare bones it, right? And again, your doctors are going to diagnose, your counselors that accept insurance have to give you that diagnosis, right? So let's also normalize this. Just because a counselor says to you, well, I'm giving you this diagnosis, doesn't mean anything negative. It means, hi, we want to get paid for our services.
That's true. They need that code, that medical code.
Right? Let's make this more real, right? And I often tell my clients, hey, unless you want to pay me out of pocket and believe me, I'm expensive, let's not do that. Let me do my job. Let me give you a diagnosis so that your insurance is going to come in and pay for you to get the help that you need, right? But let me remind you, you are not anxiety or depression or bipolar or all of these things. That is not your identity.
Come
Your
on.
right? Your identity is who you are. What are you suffering with? What are you struggling with? Any of those mental health disorders that we bill for, right?
Yeah.
But do they have to be who you are? No, they don't. So let's not do that.
I'm sorry, I'm at awe because we are so quick to label ourselves. And one thing I know is we'll take a label and we'll put ourselves in that category, even if we don't fit all the parts. It's kind of like we'll wiggle ourselves in there. And I think in this day and time where we talk about mental health, and for those that haven't heard Mommy Mondays before, we are like, I talk all the time about there's mental health and there's mental illness. Everybody should be working on their mental health. Okay. But not everybody is dealing with a mental illness. Even if you deal with something like anxiety, it doesn't mean that you are diagnosed as anxious or have a anxious diagnosis. Um, and so being mindful of that, it kind of even gives us that bare bones feeling like this is something I'm encountering, something I'm experiencing, but it's not who I am. And I know another thing, we this day and time, because we're using these words, people just gravitated in that victim mentality, like it's a security blanket.
Well, because again, at some point in time, they thought it had to become part of their identity, right? And
Yeah.
so, have you ever heard the term self-fulfilling prophecy?
Like manifesting.
Well, it's kind of like that, but it's like, let me put it this way, since we're going to use the spiritual realm here for a little bit. When we tell our children not to do something and they become defiant, or when God tells us to do something and we become defiant, right?
Mhm.
And everything, it's kind of like that. Does that make sense? Like if you
Yeah.
accuse your child of doing something bad, and a lot of times as teenagers we just look at them and our parents and we're like, well, let me show you what that looks like then. That
That's
is a
true. You spoke
self-fulfilling.
it on them. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And so sometimes I think that's what happens to us, is that inadvertently somebody speaks that onto us, right?
Yeah.
And then we become that because we don't realize what they have done to our spirit.
I love that. So one thing I do want to highlight is the fact that you are currently a counselor for the military, correct?
Yes.
And one thing I want to highlight is in the military, they deal with a lot of PTSD. I mean, if we think being at home and the safety of our home and the safety of our routine, that we're dealing with anxiety, I can imagine if you're on enemy territory and you're going into war, what that looks like. And so you deal with those type of people every day. And so we loosely use the term trauma. How would you look at anxiety when trying to figure out that root, where that fear and that worry is coming from?
So again, and I know we've had this discussion before, I look at it from like, when did it start? What did that look like? I also go back to the ACEs. So the ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, right? And so if somebody is coming to me, whether they're in the military or not, I'm going to ask them about their childhood because I want to fully understand where they're coming from. So the ACEs is 10 questions. And if you didn't experience this thing, then you get a 0. If you did experience it, the score is 1. All
Mhm.
right. However, they say that once you hit like the magic number of 4 or more ACEs in your childhood, that it has its own buildup of trauma. So then you're less resilient to doing things in the military and being exposed to even more trauma, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like almost like you're predisposed.
Yes, yes, exactly. In fact, over the weekend, I did a lot of reading on PTSD and trauma and the ACEs and everything. And it was amazing because even I learned more things. And I've been studying ACEs off and on since 2017.
I think I love that you say that because I think sometimes when we see a counselor or even a psychiatrist, we forget that they're practicing too, just like with medicine. And
Yes.
so the wealth of knowledge is only based off of what you know today. We all have to continue to learn. And so it really makes me excited that you're continuing to learn, even though you don't have to. You know what I mean? Like you've already made it.
So that's interesting that you bring that up. So let's segue for a second.
Okay.
I I feel like ethical, moral counselors should always continue to learn. In fact, if you, even on my desk right now, I have two other books with me. Not that you can see them because of the.
Somatic psychotherapy. Yeah.
And then the other one is called Taming Your Amygdala. So I feel like good counselors continue to learn how to add new tools to their toolbox. Don't really like that metaphor, by the way. But again, to help our clients, I prefer the drawer. So I tell my clients,
Okay.
hey, if you walked into your bedroom and you opened your drawer, what are the tools you are going to have in your drawer? Right? Because I
Yeah.
think that not everybody works with the toolbox and a hammer anymore, right? So let's look at it as maybe it's the junk drawer, right? And
Yeah.
they're opening up the junk drawer and they're like, oh, I have this tool and this tool and this tool in there.
I love that. And that makes us think that we're never going to just arrive. We're always kind of learning. And I know one thing that I love that you just blew my mind with one time when we talked, that we actually need like 30 coping skills. Can
Yes.
you
And
share
that's
with them?
okay, so the reason why I say 30, 30 is not a magic number in any stretch of the imagination. But the issue is our brains are so adaptable, right? That it's like eating our favorite food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a week. And guess what you don't like after a week of eating? That food, right? I don't
Mhm.
care how much you like pizza. Okay. If you ate it every meal, you would be like, yeah, no, no, thank you, girlfriend. I don't want that anymore. So your
Mhm.
brain does the same thing with your coping skills, right? And so I want people to have a wide variety of coping skills to fit every situation or as close to every situation as they can. Some of my people, because we now live in the Pacific Northwest, they're like, oh, I'm just going to go hiking. And I joke with them. I go, oh, so when you get mad at your coworker slash your leadership, yeah, you're really going to go for a hike? And they look at me and they go, well, ma'am, I'm a service member. I can't leave my job. And I'm like, exactly. So what are you going to do when you're struggling with your coworker or your boss and or their boss or the commander, right? And putting that into perspective for them of like, yeah, hiking is great. Guess what you're not going to do when your boss is yelling at you?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like having more tools in that drawer that you're talking about. Like some people, I love it because it's almost like, well, just stop doing that or just stop feeling that way or just everybody has the solution, right? And sometimes we may feel like we have the solution, but depending upon the season that we're in, depending upon what child we're dealing with, depending upon the atmosphere, I can't just have, because I've heard some people say you need five. What if I don't have access to all five of those? What if I don't have that chocolate bar or I can't just walk away or I don't want to scream, you know what I mean? Because screaming, I feel like is another coping skill that a lot of us have to, take out the drawer. And so I love that you say that because I hope after today's conversation, we'll go towards the end about some practical things we can do when we feel anxious, but that we continue to do our own digging. I know Mommy Mondays will have some workshops on coping skills. We'll bring Rose back so we can build our arsenal, but continue to do that self work, that self development, understanding that you need at least 30. I love that because that gives us a number.
I have two worksheets that I can email to you later on, and you can disperse them however you need to. I found them on the internet. One has 99 coping skills on there. Yes, 99. It's
I didn't even
great.
know it's that many because I'm
Well,
like,
wait, then I have
oh,
then I have another one that has unconventional coping skills, and I think there's between like 40 and 48. It's really an odd number for me, but and there's some overlap, obviously, right? But
mhm.
then you have a wide variety, and you can just highlight them and say, okay, these are the ones that are going into my drawer.
And I'm going to work on using them.
Right.
That's the key. That's the key. Okay. So let's say someone comes into your office. Are there any red flags to know when it's time? Sorry, before someone gets to your office, as regular people, are there any red flags that we should be aware of within ourselves or our loved one on when it's time to seek a professional?
So I generally tell people, listen, if you're not feeling good for a day or two, you're probably okay, right? But
Mhm.
once it spans like 5, 6, 7 days, then you really need to be able to come back and self-assess and be like, wait a minute, it's been 7 days and I'm not feeling it. I'm sleeping all the time. Maybe I'm not eating. Maybe I'm eating too much. Maybe I'm not sleeping at all. Maybe I don't want to get up and shower. Maybe I don't want to talk to my children or my spouse. Maybe I won't, make that FaceTime phone call to my family back home, right? So those are the red flags that when people are like that, I'm like, okay, well, we need to do something about that now because this is impeding your whole life, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes when we're in the thick of it, we are not objective about who we are and how we're doing. And we
Yeah.
really need that outside, hey, are you okay? Right. And
Yes.
then when I ask that question, people try and laugh and go, yeah, Rose, I'm cool. And I just look at them and I'm like, dude, you're not okay. So why do you think you can lie to me, the counselor of all people? Right?
That part. Yeah. And I think too, our society kind of teaches us that you're a failure if you fall apart. And it's like,
Um, that's something that I tend to address with some of my clients, a few of them, not as many once they get to know me because they know that I don't believe that that's a failure. But I just look at them and I ask them this question. I'm like, okay, cool. What's making you a failure? And then they look at me and they go, well, I'm crying or I'm afraid or I'm not sleeping. And I'm like, okay, well, are you still alive? And then they're like, oh, well, yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, then let's get you some coping skills. Let's give you this safe space to process what you're going through. Let's figure out why you're feeling like this, right?
yeah,
Let's do a little bit of like solution focused stuff and kind of dig into what is the root cause of this. Hey, maybe it's the fact that we don't get enough sunshine, right?
that part,
Okay, so
especially being out here.
fun fact for you. I actually looked it up today because somebody else was joking. So when I got here, so I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, right? And everybody was like, oh, Rose, you can't handle the winters here. So I looked it up today. Cleveland, average winter of sunshine or average year of sunshine is 166 days.
Uh-huh.
Do you know how many days they have of average sunshine in Seattle? 152. So Cleveland gets 14 days more sun than Seattle does.
But that feels like a huge difference. And I think, see, I'm stumped now because I feel like I was just attacked with the rain here. Like it just kind of puts you in a depressive mood, but it also puts you in an anxious mood because when you don't feel like doing anything, you feel like you're falling behind, and then you get overwhelmed, and then that starts happening. Like I'm falling behind, and when am I ever going to catch up? I'm overwhelmed, and now I feel like I'm racing. Um, and
Can
so
I
that's
take that apart a little bit for you?
sure. Do your
Okay, so first off, because we live in a place with less sun, obviously it's not the 300 days of sunshine that Colorado gets, right? So let's
Mhm.
put that in perspective, right? I think that everybody here pushes vitamin D because they know it helps with seasonal depression. Guess what we don't always talk about? We do not always talk about the fact that in order to properly absorb vitamin D, you need to have a magnesium supplement in your body. Okay. Yes. Yes, we don't talk about that as much. And did
No.
we know that there are like somewhere between 8 and 10 different types of magnesium and they all do, yes ma'am, they all do different things. Okay? There's one excuse me, there's one that's a little bit better for anxiety and depression. There's one that's good for sleep. There's one that's good for like fibromyalgia. There's one that's good for cardiovascular things. There's one that's good for constipation. And of course, you have your old-fashioned magnesium sulfate that you can soak in a tub with. So I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, hey, You don't have to remember everything I'm saying. Go to healthline.com, type in types of magnesium. It will give you a little paragraph about each type. And then you can kind of turn around and decide, oh, I need this one, or I'm going to try this one. The only one I'm ever going to tell my clients not to take is magnesium oxide, which you can pick up at Walmart off the shelf, because that form of magnesium is not easily absorbed by the body. And the side effect is it causes diarrhea. So let's not do that to our bodies.
That'll make you feel anxious. Diarrhea. Where's the toilet? Like, but
Right?
I love that you say that, because when we say stuff like holistic living, we forget that our psychosomatic system, our gut, our all those things, it's important to what's happening in our mental space. And so if we're not eating the right things, or if we're eating poorly, it can really exacerbate those feelings of anxiety. And so I also asked oh, Jessica, she puts there, interesting. Right?
Yeah.
I think that is so important. And when we're doing our research and when we're taking our vitamins, like all these things play a part. And then it goes back to that identity thing. It's not who you are, and maybe what you're eating or not eating.
So I actually did some research on this recently. So I follow a doctor on Instagram, and he talked about the fact that our vitamins in our soil have been so depleted, and he gave numbers. So I went looking for his numbers and I couldn't find it. But I did find one article. Mind you, this article was written and published in 2012. So it's 12 years old now. And in that article, it said that between 7 to 29% of the magnesium in the soil has been depleted.
So we need it.
Right.
And it's not going to just all be in our food.
The other thing I read, and I have the references and I'll send you those too, but I saw another study that said that corn, the protein in corn has depleted between 30 and 50%. So that old time fallacy of, oh, you don't need to supplement, throw that thought out the window, because with soil depletion, you do need to supplement now. Supplement healthy, make choices. Like, I don't take like a 1-a-day multivitamin. I take what I think I need. And I'm doing that because I'm researching it. Right. I'm going to Healthline. I'm going to my favorite Cleveland clinic because, again, Clevelander, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at reputable sources and then going, okay, well, I have these symptoms. Let me try this. And I'll try it for like 60 to 90 days. If I feel better after 60 to 90 days, then I'm fairly certain that it is making a difference. Then I'm going to continue. If I'm not seeing improvement in that in 60 to 90 days, then I'm going to be like, okay, well, obviously I didn't need it, so I don't take it anymore. So that's how I have looked at nutrition these days. The other supplement I really want to talk about tonight is, not only do you need the magnesium with the vitamin D, but I was researching GABA. So GABA is a neurotransmitter in your brain. And I had a client in my private practice that was struggling with ADHD. And so I went searching, like, okay, well, what can we give him that's not Adderall, right? Because again, he didn't want to be on Adderall. And I was trying to support him in his desire. So I went searching and I found out that the symptoms of low GABA are so close to like anxiety symptoms. And
How do you spell that? GABA?
GABA, it's GABA.
Uh-huh.
And they can
That's
have
it?
Yes.
So we need to take GABA?
I think, ma'am, am I a doctor? No, ma'am. I am going to tell you.
Look, I'm making my grocery list.
I adore that about you, but I want you to research this.
Okay, homework.
Yes, ma'am, homework. So
Okay.
The one thing, I give my clients information, but then I tell them, hey, I want you to empower yourself, right? To research these things and make informed decisions. So talk to your doctor, research it for yourself. Don't take my word for it, because guess what I don't do, Kia? I don't walk on water. I wish I did, actually. That would be so much fun. I do not have a magic wand. Like, they didn't give me a magic wand just because I passed a licensing thing and got a master's degree, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
I'm
true.
not a mind reader. So I give my clients information and I'm like, this is the research that I have done. This is what I've read. Here's an article. Here's a website. This is what I've seen. Go research it for yourself and make informed decisions, because again, my goal as a counselor is to empower my clients. Because
Oh, go ahead.
well, I was going to say I try and put myself out of a job, but that's impossible here because there are 6.1 million people. So I'm always going to have a client.
That is true. I think I want to highlight something that you said, if that's okay.
Sure.
I want to highlight, make sure we are finding the right counselor, because someone's worldview can dictate their treatment for you and how they even converse with you. Because even hearing how you speak, you're speaking from, look, we're going to empower you, we're going to educate you, we're going to figure out what's going on, but don't worry, that's not the end all be all. We just need a starting point. I think that's so important because, like you said earlier, some counselors don't want to put their personal business out there or give you a glimpse into them to show their humanity. And for some of us, we need that. And if that's your type, then you need to make sure that you put that on your list as far as your counselor. I strongly advise everyone, especially Christians, make sure you're finding a Christian counselor, because just like Rose said earlier, certain people believe even something with anxiety is from different things. And if you have someone that doesn't have the same source of your strength, someone doesn't have the great counselor that you believe in, they can be giving you contradicting information, but then also it could be shaping your belief system into um more of a self-absorbed type, it's on me, it's on me, it's on me, versus a dependency, versus a what's my health like, what's my body like, what's my spiritual. And so I love that about you, that you look at the whole picture and not just what the science of psychology says.
Thank you. So when we're looking at finding the right counselor, I want to also add in, I think that I would add in helplessness to what you said,
Mm,
because I think sometimes we feel helpless. I have always said from the day I graduated, I looked at my clients and I'm like, my goal is for you not to need me. And they would look at me and they'd go, well, my last counselor I just spent 4 years with. And I'm like, well, dude, buckle up, because I'm not that counselor. I'm like, my goal is to get you to a point where you gradually do not need me. And then you're coming in for a checkup, and being like, hey, I just need to come in and talk and make sure everything's still going fine, that I'm still using the tools that we agreed upon and everything. So if I don't see you for every 6 weeks, I don't see you for every 6 weeks. Right. But know that if you need me, it's
yeah.
like pick up the phone or text me or however you reach me, right?
I'll be there.
Right. That is important. And so when we're talking about finding the right counselor, all right, so understand that, so my credentials are, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. So I was trained to look at things from a wellness or strengths-based model. Okay. And so everything I do is going to be, where's the wellness? Where's the strength? For me being a Christian, it's also, where's the spirituality? Okay. Social workers are trained more from a disease medical model. So they're the ones that tend to use a lot more like CBT and more diagnosis and stuff. Not that they're not great counselors. They just have a different worldview about what counseling looks like. And then you have your licensed marriage and family therapist, okay? And so they look at things from a systemic view. So they look at, well, what was your childhood? And they'll draw your little chart of your genogram, right? I love genograms, by the way. They're so much fun to do. I hated them in school, but now I love them. growth. There was growth. That's all that um, but again, so they also tend to look at things a little bit more holistically, but they look at it again from a systemic. So they bring in what's going on in the world, what's going on in your home, what happened to you as a child and in your upbringing, and then put that into a whole piece, right? So again, they're very holistic in their approach too. So find somebody that matches what you believe in. If you believe in the medical model, then a social worker might be good for you. If you believe in like strengths and wellness, then a counselor is going to be fine. If you want to delve more into that family relationship, look for somebody that has MFT, or like me, because I'm switching. My PhD that I'm in school for now is in marriage and family. My master's was in clinical mental health counseling. So I have the best of both worlds because I can flex into either or of those. But that's what you want. I tell my clients flat out, I'm like, hey, come see me 1-2 visits. If you're not feeling it, guess what? I'm going to give you the number to another counselor.
Yes. Oh my gosh. You're not married to your counselor. And like, oh my gosh. Thank you for that. Because I think sometimes we feel trapped and feel stuck. And it works both ways. Us as a counselor gets to let someone go, and you get to let your counselor go. You have to find that right fit. Else you're not going to have that rapport, that trust, like you talked about earlier. Because that's huge in what you're doing and your mental health.
And all right, so this might be a little bit selfish on my part. I'd like to preserve my reputation as being a good counselor, right? And if I am not the right fit, then I'm not the right fit.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Right. It totally is. In fact, I tell them at all of the briefings I do on base, I'm like, this is my number. If you don't like me, if I'm not your cup of tea, hey, text me and say, Rose, what's the number to the other MFLACs? I will give them to you. Do you know why? Number one, I'm pretty healthy. My ego is fine. And number two, it's not about me. It's about that person getting the therapist or the counselor that they need that's going to help them grow and heal. And if I'm not that person, then I'm just not that person.
Y'all see why I love her? Okay, hold on. Okay, Jessica said how beautiful. Okay. Before we wrap up, I do want to give some people some of those tools that we talked about for our drawers. And you guys, again, we'll continue the conversation because this is so beautiful how this is panning out, this conversation. But when feeling anxious, what can someone mentally or physically do to balance themselves?
Okay, so I preach a lot about self-care first and foremost, okay? So I really need you to look at, am I taking my supplements? If I'm on medication, am I taking it the right way, right? Because again, my clients that are on meds, I'm like, do you take it at the same time every day? Because that makes a huge difference in how effective it is, right? And so I want them to do the things that they're doing and do it well. So sleep and food, exercise. Oh my gosh. I'm like, when was the last time you even went for a 10-minute walk? When was the last time you sat in your car in the sunshine, even if it's brutally cold outside, but the sun is shining? Please get outside and sit in your warm car so that you can soak up that pseudo sun, right? When was the last time you got a hug? A 20-second hug can be as effective as some antidepressants. Not all, so don't drop taking your meds, please.
And just hold people.
That's what I do. I drive to Bonnie Lake and I go hug my grandbabies. Yes, I practice what I preach, guys. But again, that's really super important. So let's look at ways that we can raise those brain chemicals: music, drawing, talking to somebody, whether it's a counselor or your spouse or your sibling, maybe that you're really close to, mom, dad, a best friend that you've had for a while. Go on the hikes, go swim, hey, eat a piece of chocolate. Right?
Yes.
Don't feel guilty because, oh my gosh, I've had a stressful day. So you know what? I'm going to reach for that Dove chocolate and I'm going to eat 2 pieces and I'm going to be okay with it. Give yourself permission to do things in moderation, right? We often don't give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves. But if we take care of ourselves, guess what? You're going to be healthier overall.
Can I want to stop? I want to stamp that. Like, I just want to, because when I first started Mommy Mondays and I was talking about self care, the pushback that I got, and a lot of it were from Christians. Oh, self care is selfish. Like, why are you out here promoting for people to be so self absorbed? And I'm like, you cannot mentally, physically, emotionally take care of someone if you're not sound. And what we find is a lot of people lack that self awareness. And so they point at other people versus taking responsibility. But once we flip that around, and I think that's one thing, especially as being moms, we cannot trust the world to give us the tools that we need to be a good mom. We have to figure out what that looks like for us and stop with the mom goals in the sense of comparing ourselves to other people. What does it work for me? Because God gave them specifically to me. And I am specifically for my children. And so who I am is valid. It's enough. But if I don't know who that is and how to even settle myself, how can I do that for my child?
And you can't. And so you're hitting on a theme that I've been really contemplating in my own world as not only a woman but also as a therapist, because oftentimes those two worlds collide very well for me. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that we are not always taught every tool that we need, right? Because it would be impossible, number one. But number two, our parents didn't necessarily know things, or things change, or we have new information, and so I feel like sometimes the whole world is screaming at me to do things one way, and
Yes.
my heart is saying, back off, because I am the one that's living this life. And I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to read my Bible. I'm going to talk to other people and get some input, hopefully objective input. I'm going to talk to a counselor or a pastor or somebody. And then I am going to follow my heart, because we have to be able to trust our own heart as well as take in all this vast amount of information.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because I even know the word says like the heart is deceitful, but she's talking about from that understanding part, like not falling. Because some people say, follow your heart, like as if you're following the emotion. And no, she's like, no, follow the sound knower inside yourself, that discernment, you know what I mean? That's connected with God, that has knowledge, that has awareness, and kind of go from there. Which I love because that's that intuition, that's that instinct, you know what I mean? Like, I just love it. I just love you and I love it all. And I'm excited that we continue this journey on making people more self aware and looking at a holistic aspect of things. But also that this is something that we all encounter. Anxiety is something we all encounter. Other things, we all have encountered it before. And I just pray that we aren't so quick to label ourselves, um, and that we don't feel that flame that the world wants us to have, where we have a distrust for ourselves, like.
So I'm sure you know it, and I can never quote it totally at one in order. That's the word I was searching for, the phrase. My brain is starting to be like, wait, you've talked all night, Rose. What are you doing?
Yeah, I know, we're wrapping up, guys. We're wrapping up.
um, but the verse Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart because everything you do flows from it.
Yep.
And so I just wanted to add that that's what I mean when I'm like, follow your heart, because that verse kind of flows within me. And does that make sense?
Yeah,
And so
no,
I
it makes
wanted
sense.
to make sure that piece was in there.
Yeah, and that's why I said something, because I know your heart in a sense, and I'm just making that delineation, because this world has, be who you are, trust yourself. And I'm like, no, I no. You know what I mean? Like, and then some of us don't even like ourselves, but we're gonna listen to ourselves. Like, come on. And then the word says, you're right in your own mind. That's why you need to talk, and that's why you need to, because it's not always right. And even with something dealing with anxiety, like, people are so quick to say, "Oh, I'm anxiety," or I'm this, I'm that, or that's gonna make me anxious. It's like, no, you really just need a routine. Like, how is your time? If you're rushing everywhere, if you're not eating, you know what I mean? So those really need to be asked. And if you really follow your discerner, you know what I mean? It's kind of like your body is screaming out, like, hey, you haven't eaten. Hey, I don't like feeling this way. Hey, you've trained me to be anxious. And that's a whole other conversation.
Oh my gosh. And that reminds me, that was something I wanted to touch on, but we will definitely touch on that next time.
Yes, so we will do a part 2, you guys, for sure. Next week we have our mom confidence, where we just pour into ourselves. We just have girl time. So we're gonna talk about makeup and skincare. But if not the following, I'll check with your schedule. We'll do a part 2 to anxiety and really deal with how are we training our brain in these moments of anxiety. Okay,
Sounds
and
like
how
a
are we
great
training our
plan.
children? Huh?
Sounds like a great plan.
Yay, we're doing it, Rose. Woohoo! So, any final thoughts from anyone? I'll first go with you, Rose. And if you guys have any final thoughts, please put it in the comments. We'll keep checking in throughout the week as we always do. But I know this conversation has been enriching for me. And so, if there's anything you want to talk to Rose about before our next session, please keep it in the comments. But, Rose, any final thoughts?
I just want to say thank you for welcoming me here today and allowing me to have this space. It's been a pleasure. I have totally enjoyed my time. I have also been blessed because I looked at the comments and I'm like, wow, this is so amazing and it's beautiful. And you guys have given back to me as much as I hope that I have given to you tonight.
Yeah, you have. Thank you. And so we'll continue, guys. We'll see you guys again soon for part 2. Until then, and Rose, if you could stay on for me real quick. Until then, you guys, like we say around here, have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week on purpose. All right, guys. Love you. I'll see you soon.